Hi, everybody. Okay. How's everybody doing? I see Sunanda. I see a dark being.
You do thumbs down.
Hi there. And okay, so we are on page 713, and let's see. What's the date? What's the year? What's the month? Okay, we're on the chapter, The Master of Narendra. This is Sunday, March 1st, 1885, so it is basically the last year of Sri Ramakrishna's life. Okay. In the cool shade of the late afternoon, the devotees walked about in the temple garden, leaving the master and M in the room. The master whispered to M, "All say that they meditate well. Why is it different with Paltu? What do you think of Narendra? He is utterly guileless. Just now he is faced with so many difficult family problems, and so his spiritual progress is a little checked, but it will not be so for long." Narendra was arguing on the path with a Vedantist. Leave it to Narendra to argue. Now and then, the master went out to look at them. As the devotees gathered in the room, he asked Mahima to recite a hymn. Mahima chanted a verse from the Mahanirvana Tantra. "We worship the Brahman consciousness in the lotus of the heart, the undifferentiated, who is adored by Hari, Hara, and Brahma." Mahima recited a few more hymns, and at last one to Shiva by Shankaracharya, that compared the world to a deep well and a wilderness. Mahima was a householder. The hymn ran thus: "O great God, O thou auspicious one, with the moon shining in thy crest, slayer of Madana, that is the god of love," that's what they say, "wielder of the trident, unmoving one, Lord of the Himalayas, O consort of Durga, Lord of all creatures, thou who scatterest the distress of the fearful, rescue me, helpless as I am, from the trackless forest of this miserable world. O beloved of Parvati's heart, O thou moon-crested deity, master of every being, Lord of hosts, O thou..." What is Lord of hosts? I think that's a very Christian sort of reference. What's a host? When you go into a restaurant, I think this must be God, Maheshwara. Anyone got a better idea than what else it could be apart from Lord of Hosts? I'd love to see the Bengali on this, or the Sanskrit. Okay. O Vamadeva, self-existent one, O Rudra, wielder of the bow, rescue me, helpless as I am, from the trackless forest of this miserable world. O blue-throated god, Shiva, whose ensign is the bull, O five-faced one, Lord of the world, thou who wearest snakes upon thy wrists, O thou auspicious one, O Shiva, O Pashupati, O thou Lord of Parvati. And Pashupati is actually Lord of the beasts, because everybody finds refuge in Shiva. So Pashu is a beast, any kind of an animal, from slimy beings under rocks to snakes and ferocious animals, all find refuge in Shiva because he's so compassionate. I'm particularly fond of Pashupati, that name. Okay, O thou, Lord of Parvati, rescue me, helpless as I am, from the trackless forest of this miserable world. O Lord of the universe, O Shiva Shankara, O God of gods, thou who dost bear the river Ganges in thy mitted locks. Thou, master of Pramata and Nandika, those are the attendants of Shiva. O Hara, Lord of the world, rescue me, helpless as I am, from the trackless forest of this miserable world. O King of Kashi, Kashi is Benares, Varanasi, Lord of the cremation ground at Manikarnika, that's the big cremation ground, the huge cremation ground at Kashi, where it says if you die in Benares, in Kashi, the Lord Shiva comes and liberates you right there. And Manikarnika is the big ghat where many cremations are done. O mighty hero, thou the destroyer of Daksha's sacrifice, O all-pervasive one, O Lord of hosts, there we go again, omniscient one, who art the sole indweller in every heart, O Lord, rescue me, helpless as I am, from the trackless forest of this miserable world. O great God, compassionate one, O benign deity, O Vyomkesha, that is, they say, a name of Shiva. Duh, okay, got that. Vyom is often something that they say associated with the Shiva puja. I think it's like a sound of the drum. Thy body is smeared with ashes. Thou art garlanded with human skulls. Rescue me, helpless as I am, from the trackless forest of this miserable world. O thou who dwellest on Mount Kailash, thou whose carrier is the bull. O conqueror of death, O three-eyed one, Lord of the three worlds, beloved of Narayana, conqueror of lust, thou Shakti's Lord, rescue me, helpless as I am, from the trackless forest of this miserable world. Lord of the universe, refuge of the whole world, O thou of infinite forms, soul of the universe, O thou in whom repose the infinite virtues of the world. O thou adored by all, compassionate one, O friend of the poor, rescue me, helpless as I am, from the trackless forest of this miserable world. Master Mahima, why do you call the world a deep well or a trackless forest? An aspirant may think so in the beginning, but how can he be frightened by the world if he holds fast to God? Then he finds that this very world is a mansion of mirth. Here I can eat, drink, and make merry. Why should you be frightened? Hold fast to God. What if the world is like a forest of thorns? Put on shoes and walk on the thorns. Whom should you fear? You won't have to play again the part of the thief in the game of hide and seek if you touch the granny. King Janaka used to fence with two swords, the one of knowledge and the other of action. Nothing can frighten an expert player. To M. My mind is still drawn to what he just recited. Sri Ramakrishna referred to the hymns chanted by Mahima. Nabai Chaitanya and other devotees began to sing. They were joined by the master, who danced drunk with divine love. Afterwards he said, "This is the one thing needful, the chanting of God's name. All else is unreal. Love and devotion alone are real, and other things are of no consequence." It's interesting how this comes up now, because I remember last week there was a discussion on the path of jnana and the path of bhakti. And this shows how they merge, because he's talking about the path of discernment or discrimination or jnana, because discriminating between what is real and what is unreal. But they do in a way discussing devotion. It's like only devotion alone is real. Love and devotion alone is real, and all things are of no consequence. So this shows that you can definitely use the path of jnana while being a bhakta, and the paths really merge. It's sort of artificial to say a person is this way or this way, because we have to use all parts of our personality. Later, Sri Ramakrishna went out in the direction of the Panchavati. He asked M about Binod, a student in M's school, who now and then experienced ecstasy while thinking of God. The master loved him dearly. As he was returning to his room with M, he asked, "Well, some speak of me as an incarnation of God. What do you think about it?" The master came back to his room and sat on the small couch. He repeated the question to M. The other devotees were seated at a distance and could not follow the conversation. Master, what do you say? M. I think so too. You are like Sri Chaitanya. Master, is it a full manifestation of God or a part? Tell me how much. M. I don't know, sir, but it is true that there is in you an incarnation of the divine power. There is no doubt that God alone dwells in you. Master, that is true. Chaitanya wanted to realize Shakti, the divine power. Chaitanya also wanted to realize Shakti, the divine power. Narendra was engaged in a heated discussion. Ram, who had recently recovered from an illness, joined him. Master to M. I don't like such discussions. To Ram. Will you stop that? You haven't been well. All right, go on softly. Don't get so excited. To M. I don't like these discussions. I used to weep and pray to the Divine Mother, saying, Oh, Mother, one man says it is this, while another says it is that. Do thou tell me, O Mother, what is the truth? And that is the end of that particular day. We'll move on to another, but before we move on, any questions or discussion on anything? Everyone rest satisfied? Very good. Okay, we'll move on. Okay.
Are any better translations of those songs?
No. There's another translation, that two other translations that are done of the gospel in English. And one is done by his former assistant who left the order, and it's just like he's trying to compete with him, and it's not very good. And another one that was done and published by M's publishing house, and it's really very poor English.
Okay.
It's very hard to find something that has, when you actually try to do some sort of translation of these, you realize how incredibly masterful Swami Nikhilananda was, and Joseph Campbell, and John Moffat, and oh God, what was her name? A president's daughter who also was involved in this. Roosevelt. What was her? Anyway, her Artrum. Anyway, she helped in there also. But if you try to, it's very, very tough to do because some of the concepts don't even exist in English. And then you try to do it, and of course they're going to go for the more common expressions like the Christian imagery that we find with "O Lord of Hosts," because it's a very common thing in the Christian tradition. But then you'd like, really, what does that mean? What is Lord of Hosts? So, in any case, they always say translation is interpretation. So, having looked at some other translations, is like, this is really good. It's really good. Saturday, March 7th, 1885. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Sri Ramakrishna was in his room at Dakshineshwar, conversing happily with his devotees. Babaram, the younger Naran, Paltu, Haripada, Mohini Mohan, and others were present. A young Brahmin who had been staying with the master a few days was also there. The Holy Mother, Sri Ramakrishna's wife, was living in the Nahabat. Occasionally she would come to Sri Ramakrishna's room and attend to his needs. Mohini Mohan had brought his wife and Nabin's mother with him to the temple garden from Calcutta. This Mohini Mohan is M. That's one of he's got a couple of pseudonyms, that's one of them. And he brought his wife and Nabin's mother with him to the temple garden from Calcutta. And his wife was later initiated by Sri Ramakrishna and by Sarda Devi later. The ladies were with the Holy Mother. They were waiting for an opportunity to visit the master when the men devotees would leave the room. Again, we have to remember that this was the time when Purta was being observed, so the men and women were always kept separate. Sri Ramakrishna was sitting on a small couch. As he looked at the young devotees, his face beamed with joy. Rakhal was not then living at Dakshineshwar with the master. Since his return from Vrindavan, he had been living at home. Master, smiling. Rakhal is now enjoying his pension. Since his return from Vrindavan, he has been staying at home. His wife is there. But he said to me that he would not accept any work, even if he were offered a salary of 1,000 rupees. Rakhal would lie down here and say to me that he didn't care even for my company. He was then passing through such an exalted state. Bhavanat is married, but he spends the whole night in spiritual conversation with his wife. The couple pass their time talking of God alone. I said to him, have a little fun with your wife now and then. What? He retorted angrily. Shall we too indulge in frivolity? Okay. Sri Ramakrishna began to talk about, you can see Sri Ramakrishna was really amused by that. Sri Ramakrishna began to talk about Narendra, master to the devotees. I haven't felt the same strong longing for the younger Naren that I felt for Narendra, to Haripada. Do you go to Girish Ghosh's house? Haripada, yes, I go there very often. He's our neighbor. Master, does Narendra too go there? Haripada, yes, I see him there occasionally. Master, what does he say in reply to Girish? Because Girish spoke of Sri Ramakrishna as an incarnation of God. Haripada, Narendra has been defeated in the argument. Master, no. Narendra says Girish Ghosh has such strong faith. Why should I contradict him? The brother of Judge Anukal Mukhopadhyay's son-in-law was in the room. The master asked him, do you know Narendra? Brother, yes, sir. He's a very intelligent young man. Master, to the devotees. He must be a good man, because he speaks highly of Narendra. Narendra was here the other day and sang with Trilokya Sanyal. But that day his singing seemed flat to me. Babaram was a student in the entrance class at the school where M taught. Master, to Babaram, where are your books? Aren't you attending to your studies? To M, he wants to stick to both. That is, both God and the world. That is very difficult. What will you gain by knowing God partially? Vasishtadeva, great sage that he was overcome at the death of his sons. That amazed Lakshmana, and he asked Rama the reason. Rama said, Brother, what is there to wonder at? He who has knowledge has ignorance also. Brother, go beyond both knowledge and ignorance. If a thorn enters the sole of your foot, you get another thorn to take out the first one. Afterwards, you throw both away. Likewise, one procures the thorn of knowledge to remove the thorn of ignorance. Then one goes beyond both knowledge and ignorance. Babaram, smiling. That's what I want. Master, smiling. But, my child, can you attain it by holding to both? If you want that, then come away. Babaram, smiling. Take me away from the world. Master to M. Rakal lived with me, but that was different. His father agreed to it. But if these boys stay here, there will be trouble. To Babaram. You have no strength of mind. You haven't much courage. Just see how the younger Naren says, I will come away for good. Sri Ramakrishna came down from the small couch and sat among the youngsters on the floor, M by his side. Master to M. I have been seeking one who has totally renounced lust and greed. When I find a young man, I think that perhaps he will live with me. But everyone raises some objection or other. A ghost sought a companion. It is said that a man who dies on Saturday or Tuesday becomes a ghost. Therefore, whenever the ghost saw anybody fall from a roof or stumble or faint at the road on either of those days, he would run to him, hoping that the man, through an accidental death, would become a ghost and be his companion. But such was his ill luck that everybody revived. The poor thing could not get a companion. Just see, Rakal always gives his wife as an excuse. He says, what will become of her? When I touched Narendra on the chest, he became unconscious and cried out, oh, what have you done to me? Don't you know that I have a father and a mother? Why has God made me lead this kind of life? And that the footnote here from Swami Nikhilananda says, evidently, Sri Ramakrishna was referring to his monastic life. Chaitanya Deva became a sannyasi so that all would salute him. Whoever salutes an incarnation, even once, attains liberation. Mohini Mohan had brought a basket of sweetmeats for Sri Ramakrishna. Master, who brought these sweets? Babaram pointed to Mohini Mohan. Sri Ramakrishna touched the sweets, uttering the word Om, and ate a little. Then he distributed them among the devotees. To the surprise of the others, he fed the younger Naren and a few of the boys with his own hand. Master to M. This has a meaning. There is a greater manifestation of God in people of pure heart. In former years, I used to go to Kamarpukur, and I would feed some of the young boys with my own hand. Chine Shankari would say, why don't you feed us this way? But how could I? They led an immoral life. Who would feed them? Sri Ramakrishna was in the happiest mood with his young and pure-souled devotees. He was seated on a small couch and doing funny imitations of a kirtani. That's a woman kirtan singer. The devotees laughed heartily. The kirtani is dressed lavishly and covered with ornaments. She sings, standing on the floor, a colored kerchief in her hand. Now and then she coughs to draw people's attention and blows her nose, raising her nose ring. When a respectable gentleman enters the room, she welcomes him with appropriate words, still continuing her song. Now and then she pulls her sari from her arms to show off her jewels. The devotees were convulsed with laughter at this mimicry by Sri Ramakrishna. Paltu rolled on the ground. Pointing to him, Sri Ramakrishna said to him, "Look at that child. He is rolling with laughter." He said to Paltu with a smile, "Don't report this to your father, or he will lose the little respect he has for me. You see, he's an Englishman." By that he means like an English-educated gentleman, Bengali, master to the devotees. There are people who indulge in all kinds of gossip at the time of their daily devotions. As you know, one is not permitted to talk then. So they make all kinds of signs, keeping their lips closed. In order to say, "Bring this, bring that," they make sounds like, "Huh, and such things they do, laughter. Again, there are those who bargain for fish while telling their beads. As that they mean like doing their japa with the beads. As they count the rosary with a finger, they point out the fish, indicating that one, please. They reserve all their business for that time. There are women who come to the Ganges for their bath, and instead of thinking of God, gossip no end of things. What jewels did you offer at the time of your son's marriage? Has so-and-so returned from her father-in-law's house? So-and-so is seriously ill. So-and-so went to see the bride. We hope that they will offer a magnificent dowry, and there will be a great feast. Harish always nags at me. He can't stay away from me, even an hour. My child, I couldn't come to see you all these days. I was so busy with the betrothal of so-and-so's daughter. You see, they have come to bathe in the holy river, and yet they indulge in all kinds of worldly talk. The master began to look intently at the younger Naran and went into samadhi. Did he see God himself in the pure-souled devotee? The devotee silently watched the figure of Sri Ramakrishna motionless in samadhi. A few minutes before, there had been so much laughter in the room, and now there was deep silence, as if no one were there. The master sat with folded hands, as in the photograph. After a short while, his mind came down to the relative plane. He heaved a long sigh, and became aware of the outer world. He looked at the devotees and began to talk with them of their spiritual progress. Master, to the younger Naran, I've been eager to see you. You will succeed. Come here once in a while. Well, which do you prefer, jnana or bhakti? The younger Naran, pure bhakti. Master, but how can you love someone unless you know him? See, he's kind of indicating that both paths kind of work together, pointing to M with a smile. How can you love him, pointing to M, unless you know him? Since a pure-souled person has asked for pure bhakti, it must have some meaning. One does not seek bhakti of one's own accord without inborn tendencies, that's samskaras. This is the characteristic of prema bhakti. There is another kind of bhakti called jnana bhakti, where the love of God is based on reasoning. To the younger Naran, let me look at your body. Take off your shirt. Fairly broad chest. You will succeed. Come here now and then. Sri Ramakrishna was still in the ecstatic mood. He spoke tenderly to the other devotees about their future. Master Tapaltu, you will succeed too, but it will take a little time. To Babaram, why don't I attract you to me? It is just to avoid trouble. He was very young and still living with his parents, so Sri Ramakrishna didn't want to get into it, but in fact he became one of his closest disciples and a monastic disciple. To Mohini Mohan, as for you, you are all right. There is a little yet to be done. When that is achieved, nothing will remain, neither duty nor work nor the world itself. Is it good to get rid of everything? As Sri Ramakrishna spoke these words, he looked at Mohini affectionately, as if scanning his innermost feelings. Was Mohini really wondering whether it would be wise to renounce all for God? That's M talking about himself. After a while, Sri Ramakrishna said, God binds the Bhagavata Pandit to the world with one tie. Otherwise, who would remain to explain the sacred book? In other words, Sri Ramakrishna is like kind of giving him the hint. He is the Bhagavata Pandit for Sri Ramakrishna. It'll be M, who he's calling himself Mohini Mohan, that it will be he who writes the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. So Sri Ramakrishna says that he's tied. He's tied because otherwise how could he write that sacred book? He keeps the Pandit bound for the good of men, for the good of the world. That is why the Divine Mother has kept you in the world. That's really lovely. That's really lovely to think about, that this book that we're reading now, Sri Ramakrishna could see it way, way before M knew this was going to happen. So I thought of the name, the woman who worked on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna was Margaret Woodrow Wilson, Wilson's daughter. So she was also involved in the translation. Any other questions?
I have a question, Brother.
Sure.
I can't remember what page it was on, but when Ramakrishna says anyone who bows down to an incarnation, now oftentimes when he says something, he's not necessarily referring to the people in the room. It could be a general statement, like
Right.
call the Torah and you're all blessed and all of that,
Yeah.
right? So would you interpret that to mean he's referring to those people who bow down to an incarnation knowing that they're bowing down to an incarnation, that he means a physical incarnation, or what?
I would personally interpret that as if the person has the grace and the good karma to be in the same room or building or street as an incarnation of God in the body, and he bows down to that person in the body, then he will be liberated.
Okay.
That would be my interpretation. Whether he knows him as an incarnation or whether he just sees him as a holy man wearing orange or just a holy man, period. But I mean, if a person has such good samskaras and such grace and such, I mean, that person must have performed austerities for how many thousands of lifetimes to be able to get to the point to be in the same physical space with an incarnation. And I also think that if someone very, Holy Mother and Swami Shivananda said that if it's the last birth, I mean, if you really take this seriously, if you really work on it, take it seriously, this is our last birth. If we still have desires, then yeah, then. But of course, if we see the Lord at the end of our life, if we're at the end of our life, we're thinking of the Lord, and the Lord comes, who's going to want to have the Tesla or the chocolate and coffee? You're just going to, all you're going to care about is going there.
Thanks.
Any other points? Good one. All right. Well, Tuesday, there'll be no lecture here on Sunday. I know somebody's lecturing somewhere. Is it Swami Atmavidyananda? Oh, no, they're having their Holy Mother celebration. Hollywood. Yeah, they'll be celebrating Holy Mother's Puja Sunday in Hollywood, and that will be live streamed. And then we will be celebrating it on Tuesday, so please join us here for the 16-item puja, and followed by the Homa fire with a slight break in the middle, break between the two. And what do we start at 11? 10:45? Or starting at 10:45. Okay. All right, so please join us then, and next Saturday there will be another reading, and Wednesday there will be a reading of the Gospel of Holy Mother. Okay, let us conclude with a chant. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.